Thanks again for joining me. This is my second video. I wanted to reach out and thank everybody who gave me private feedback and some comments. I'm hoping to incorporate a lot of those as I continue making these videos. Feel free to keep the comments coming. I really appreciate it. I wanted to spend today working on a book review. I recently picked up Michael Lewis's The Fifth Risk. Michael Lewis, you might be familiar with his name. He wrote The Blind Side, Moneyball, and The Big Short, all of which have been made into movies. He's written quite a few other books. I found this book incredibly compelling. The conclusions drawn in this book are really quite startling. I thought it would be really important to share what it's about. The backdrop is Donald Trump has just been elected president and he needs to transition government from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. Now, it's actually federal law. Both nominees have to send transition teams prior to the election to be prepared and hit the ground running. Trump didn't want to send a transition team. He thought it would be a waste of money. Chris Christie said, this would be a violation of federal election law. You have to. Christie starts spending money. Trump literally berates him like a child. You're stealing my money. Steve Bannon has to come in and say, listen, we have to do this. It's a violation of the law not to. After they've been elected, the Department of Energy, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce wait 1 day, 2 days, a week. They start sending emails. Nobody shows up from the Trump team, sending out notices. Hey, like, we need to transition government. You have basically 90 days or so, and then nobody from this office can make contact with your department. That's the way the law works. Nobody shows up to figure out how to manage tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, years worth of work. Balls being dropped. And really, there was a transition team with Chris Christie, but in this really interesting twist of politics, Jared Kushner's father was put in jail by Chris Christie when Chris Christie was a prosecutor decades ago. Now, when it comes time to run government, Jared Kushner wants Christie to have nothing to do with the new administration, and he's out. So this book is about three departments. The Department of Energy, which should be named the Department of Science, the Department of Agriculture, which should be named the Department of Rural America, and the Department of Commerce, which should be named the Department of Data. Really, the Department of Science, the Department of Rural America, and the Department of Data are doing tremendous work that any of us would say is justifiable, mission-driven work the government should be doing. Trump is dropping the ball in this regard, really to the detriment of the people that they said that they were going to help. They said that they were going to help all these Trump voters. What does the Department of Energy do? The Department of Energy, or the Department of Science as it should be called, they man the nuclear arsenal. They make sure that the nuclear weapons work for our defense. They regulate nuclear energy to make sure that we don't have meltdowns. They track international uranium and plutonium. They make sure that it doesn't fall into the hands of terrorists. They're the ones who send investigators out to find it. They're the ones who train border crossing agents of the rest of the world to make sure that uranium and plutonium don't cross borders. They're the ones who train the nuclear power plant inspectors of the rest of the world to make sure that a power plant isn't enriching uranium and turning it into weapons-grade uranium. They have a research arm called ARPA, which is very similar to DARPA. And their job is to do these moonshot projects to figure out how to make new sources of energy and all sorts of material science and science projects. They actually fund every single national laboratory in the United States. So they do tremendous work. The Department of Agriculture really does so much for rural America. They're in charge of food stamps, school lunches, small business development grants, government loans to small businesses. They don't come from banks. Banks don't want to take a bet on an idea. The government takes a bet on an idea. The Department of Commerce has very little to do with business. $5 billion of the Department of Commerce's budget, the total budget being $7 billion, goes to the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, the people who track and predict the weather. All your hurricanes, all of your tornadoes and storms, all of that comes from the Department of Commerce. It has very little to do with business. It has so much more to do with data. They have the kind of data that can transform America and solve all sorts of problems that we don't understand. I thought this was so fascinating. Turns out that so much of the police information that we collect is at the local level. When you extract it, what you find is police use excessive force almost always after they've been involved in some emotionally intense process. Let's say there was a suicide or a domestic abuse call with a child involved. doesn't have any time to decompress, goes on his next call, and then is much more likely to use excessive force. The Department of Commerce is really the Department of Data, the Department of Agriculture is the Department of Rural America, and the Department of Energy is really the Department of Science. And not only were none of these transitions managed properly, the core missions long-term government people had really been interested in, those missions are being dashed and demolished, really not just at the detriment of the United States of America, but at the fundamental risk, the fifth risk is what it's called, a fundamental risk of all of our futures. I mean, I could not have been more compelled by this book, and that's why I wanted to make a video about it. I hope this video wasn't too long, and if you want more videos like this, please like and comment, and really give me any feedback that you have. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.